Hey everyone, welcome for Bruce Sentar's AMA, and I'm trying desperately not to rock in this chair as we shoot in a slightly different setting, just to get some quiet because we have some yard work happening next door. Chris has the questions. I will preface, if you haven't been here before, I'm Bruce Sentar. I write lit RPG. I have some harem and romance in it, designed for men, and I'm here to do AMAs, and we are talking about author-related questions. I get a lot of ones. How do you do this? How do you do that? All sorts of things. And so I thought I'd just compile them into a specific AMA.
So, like Bruce said, we're going to try to focus on author-related questions, but that's not a strict hard rule. There's some other stuff in here too. But as always, we're going to start with our Patreon questions. Thank you guys for being members on the Patreon, and as a benefit of being a Patreon member, your questions do show up first in these AMAs monthly. So, without further ado, we're going to get started with our first question from Mute Button Hero, who asks, what prep do you do before writing, and how much just develops as the story goes? Do you plan and direct each of your character's actions in detail, or just let them do as they will, working towards the chapter's goal, and write it down more as an observer?
Hey, Mute. Thanks for being a Patreon. As for what I do, most people would call the style of writing I have is pantsing. I make most of it up as I go, but I do sort of know the characters, who they are, how they grew up, and sort of what their motivations are, so that it can flow naturally as I do that. So there has to be some framework and the people in the world, and how things work. But then once all the motivations are together, it actually flows pretty well. And I find everything to feel a lot more organic that way.
All right. Up next is from Tristan Castile, who asks, when your books go out to the voice actors to start recording for audiobooks, do you give any feedback about how they deliver certain lines, or is that out of your hands once the transcripts go to the voice actors?
So there's usually a small packet when I start a series that is, let's say, in dungeon diving, um, the Trellican. I have a specific way I might think that's pronounced, or a specific, if I make some other fantasy word, um, that goes in. There's no line by line criticism though.
Up next is from Jacob, who asks, how do you organize your thoughts and ideas for your potential and current stories? I find I have a lot of great ideas for stories, but I can never really organize my thoughts well enough to ever put anything into writing.
Again, I'm more of a pantser than a plotter. A lot of my organization goes down in just like super quick little paragraphs of things I think about that would be really cool moments. But a lot of it is who is the character and what do they want? And a lot of times, and then like, why is the world, or how is the world stopping them from getting that? And then once those kind of come together, then it flows for me. If you have ideas and you're having trouble getting them down, it's really all about practice, repetition. When I first started, I used to travel for work, and so I tried to get in the habit. My company probably didn't love this. I tried to get in the habit of, once I left work for the day while I was off traveling, that I would actually close my work laptop and do something else for me. And so I had a couple hours I was trying to do something, and I ended up spending that time writing. And that's how you get the cadence going and you turn your ideas into a story.
Up next is from Wade Thomas. As far as publishing goes, what's the book to audio process like, and how has working with Royal Guard Publishing gone for you so far, especially compared to who you were with before?
Hey, Wade. So I think there's some clarification needed there. I sold my first 3 books, Legendary Rule series, to Podium. They entirely produced it on their own, and they are the ones who sell it. Everything else I have self-produced. I have hosted 3 books through Royal Guard, as sort of a test run to see some things. It kind of worked out, but then there were some things in the back end. Long story. I might go back to hosting through them. I might not. But the audio process, you put out an ebook, it does well, you use that money, you turn around and you pay the narrators at a per finished hour rate. I think the Narrators Guild currently asks people to do a minimum of $250 per finished hour. So that's not their total hourly rate. That's for a packaged, edited, mastered 1 hour is usually at least $250. Can go sky's the limit though. Uh, uh, so then once you do that, they actually narrators in the indie space are super great. They will literally, you give them the book and you give them the money, they turn around and they'll hand you a fully mastered, edited, Audible ready version of the audiobook. And on my end, I just slap it up on the back end for Audible and it kicks out a couple days later.
So this one is kind of a twofer. It was initially a question from Adam, who asks, what has been the biggest change, or what have been the biggest changes in the industry from now, from when you joined writing about 6 years ago? And then Wolf commented under that and said, related follow-on question, how has the perpetuity of chatbots and generative AI changed the writing landscape for you? Do you find yourself having to defend work more, or are you mostly unaffected?
So I'm going to talk about the AI one. I'm really scared of having M dashes in my book. My editor puts it in, and then I've literally controlled F these last couple ones, been like, do I take the M dashes out? Because that seems to be like a trigger for people to accuse AI. But generally speaking, for me, AI hasn't really gotten there. The only thing it's had for my writing process is I might ask ChatGTP instead of using like a fantasy name generator when I'm stuck on naming things, because at this point it's really hard to name everything. What's changed in the industry? Oh, that is a very loaded question. When I first started, Lit RPG and Harem were just like tiny baby little sparkles in our great grandparents' eyes. And now they've grown into something significantly bigger. The biggest thing for me is there's IP expansions are now starting to become like pretty mainstream in the Lit RPG and Harem space. And just generally everything is maturing as there's saturation in stories. We're all trying to make them better. And the crowd that used to talk about minimum viable product is kind of gone. And now we're the crowd who's really trying to figure out what people want and create that are excelling. So that's where I really see the big change.
All right. And then our last Patreon question for this time is from Ark. It's a little bit of a longer one. He said, Dear Chris and Bruce, it's been 2 months since I started writing Ark, and I have a question for Bruce about pantsering. As far as I know, you are a pantser, and as far as I know, I am one too. What are some struggles you have as a pantser, if any, and do you do any outlining work at all? For example, I find that breaking a book into 3 sections and having a few things that need to happen in those sections is important, but other than that, it's all free-range writing. Thanks for any insight into your writing and sharing a trade secret. I promise I won't tell anybody.
Yeah, so don't tell them my trade secrets, but as a pantser, oftentimes the muse is a little more in control than I think a plotter might have. A plotter can kind of get something together and sort of continue on that route. As a pantser, if I'm struggling for a variety of reasons, words don't flow. So that's usually the biggest thing I work on. I can think of that I can secret for pantsing. How do you make that flow? And it's go out and consume books, anime, games, anything, TV. And you don't copy it, but there are bits or things that get you excited, or it'll click with something you are writing and be like, oh, I could do something kind of like that. So go out and consume. That's one thing to do. And then the other thing to do is layer your decisioning. If you're stuck, think about holistically the scene, the characters, what needs to happen, and then just go like, where are the characters? And that should be an easy checkbox. Who's in the scene? That should be another easy checkbox. And when you kind of start layering the decisions rather than trying to jump in full feet first, a lot of times you can get the start going a lot easier. At least for pantsing, those are my 2 tips.
So now we're going to move on to our Discord questions. Link to the Discord will be below in the description if you'd like to join. For the Patreon as well. So our first Discord question is from Joe Colton, who asks, if you could adapt any of your stories into an anime, which one would it be?
Ardzo.
Quick and easy.
I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love Art as a character. He is an unapologetic asshole. But he's like well-meaning asshole. Anyways, I like him. Dungeon Diving's a close second. I think that one is just a really strong story overall. Though I do think Kin is a little bland. Anyways, I like Art. I'd turn Art into an anime.
Next is from Bati and Hero344, who asks, how did you come to choose which narrators/voice actors you had for your audiobooks? Were there specific voices that you were looking for, or did the current ones just sound good to you?
So I am not an audiobook listener. I will admit this, even as I produce and I sell audiobooks. Not a big audiobook listener. I like to read. So when it came to my original voices, my earlier phase, it was, who was within my price range and selling in the genre. So I did that. And then I went to a point and said, you know what? I bet I can find someone that's a great voice and I can get them working. And that didn't work out very well. So now what I do is it's really people who are, So now what I do is people who are in the genre, who are actively producing audiobooks and people love. I'm just listening to your voices, and if you love Jessica Threet, which it seems nearly everyone does, then I'm going to use Jessica Threet.
The next question is from Skits6204422, who asks, what is your favorite mythical or science fiction creature and why?
Mythical or science fiction creature? I thought the Kunping that I used in Monomaster was sort of super cool. Sky whale, dragon sky whale. And I really liked bringing the Kunping into that story. And then also, because we're harem, we have to say that kitsunes are also pretty peak.
All right, next up is from Insidious, who asks, what do you rely on/do to search for inspirations and story material?
Yeah, everything. I don't really do, actually not everything. I don't really do horror. But I'll read Stephen King, right? I'll read Brandon Sanderson. Though admittedly I find Brandon Sanderson nowadays to be really slow. So my majority is more in the indie space, in the romantasy, and the lit RPG, and then the harem. More recently, because I kind of feel like the wells run dry in a couple of those, I have been very heavily on Royal Road and Scribble Hub just to see what's coming out.
And up next is from Tiny Nustra, who left a bunch of questions, and I remember last time that they left a bunch of questions and they said if I can only pick one it was okay, so I'm doing that again. Sorry, bro,
Sorry, Danny.
I'm not asking 10 questions.
You can do, just keep sprinkling them out through every AMA, and I'll eventually get to them all.
But the question I do want to focus on from Tiny Nustra today is the last one in this list, which is, have you ever thought of going back to a previous series and writing more in that world?
I think that's opening Pandora's box for me, because everyone has their favorite series, and if I go back to something and I write more in that world, if I write another book in that series, everyone whose favorite series is not that one is going to raise their hand and be like, will you return to the other ones? So I do think I'm going to kind of put my foot down and say with finality that what is complete is truly complete.
And our last question for the day, it's sort of a recap of a question that's already asked, but it's phrased a little differently. So Theme Park Hero asks, what was the process of making your very first series into an audiobook like?
Very first series. Well, there was a lot of nail biting. There was a lot of fretting because at that time, I wasn't doing nearly as well as it was or established, and it felt like a big leap of faith. But I did it. I hassled my narrator probably a little more than I do now. But otherwise, it was still the same process. I said, hey, will you do my book? They said, sure, I can do it in about 3 months. I was like, cool. Here it is. There's not a whole lot involved for the author when you do an audiobook. It's mostly just setting it up, getting it scheduled, and then answering any questions that might occur.
All right, and that's it for this session. Thank you guys all for your questions. Once again, there's going to be a link to the Patreon and the Discord community, both in the description below this video, so make sure you check those out. And whatever you got to say.
Thanks for joining, guys. See you guys next time.